What kind of husband gets served custody orders after being left by the roadside? I thought it was harmless fun when my friends and I made him walk home. But the next time a courier knocked, I realized Evan had been planning something bigger. How did a silly prank and a few secret messages with my coworker turn into losing my home and child? We thought it was funny. That is how it started. My friend said Evan was too serious, too boring, always worried about rules. So when we drove back from the lake, I told Colin to stop the car on the country road and let Evan out as a joke. Everyone laughed when the doors locked and we pulled away. Evan, standing there with his hands in his pockets miles from home. I said he needed the exercise, that maybe he would learn to lighten up. Kendra filmed from the back seat and posted it online before we even got home. People shared it and laughed, saying poor Evan should run faster next time. I told myself it was harmless, that marriage needed humor, even cruel humor. When Evan came home hours later, sweaty and silent, I said he was being dramatic, that a real man would laugh at the prank. He only looked at me, then at Leah, asleep on the couch, and went to bed without a word. I rolled my eyes and texted Colin that Evan had no sense of fun. Colin sent back a string of laughing emojis and said, "I was a star." That made me feel chosen, alive, like someone finally saw me. When my father Cliff heard the story, he slapped his knee and said, "Evan should be glad to have a wife who kept him on his toes." My mother, Ruth, tried to smooth it, saying maybe we went too far, but I brushed her off. My sister Kendra said the video was going viral, that people loved the stiff husband clip. I laughed and said, "Let them watch." The only one not laughing was Marjorie, Evan's mother. She called the next morning, speaking calm and low, asking if I thought humiliating my husband in front of the world would make him love me more. I hung up annoyed and told Evan his mother was poisoning him. He said nothing, only picked up a small notebook from the counter and slipped it into his bag. I told myself he was sulking again. I told myself he would get over it. But Leah looked at me with wide eyes and asked why we left Daddy on the road. I kissed her forehead and said it was just a game. She did not smile. The joke started on the road, but it did not end there. That night, after Evan finally came home, damp with sweat and dust on his shoes, I laughed and said he should thank me for the exercise. He did not answer. He walked past me, checked on Leah, who had fallen asleep on the couch, and then went into the bedroom without a word. I followed, asking why he could not take a joke, why he had to act like I had tried to kill him. He said nothing. His silence made me angry. I told him he embarrassed me by sulking, that normal men laughed when their wives teased them. He turned his back and closed his eyes. I lay there staring at the ceiling, convinced he was being unfair. The next morning, Kendra called, laughing so hard she could barely talk. She said the clip of Evan trudging down the roadside had hit 2,000 views overnight. She said comments were piling up, people calling him Mr. Serious. She said we should make a series of husband pranks. I grinned and told her maybe. I liked that strangers were on my side, that they saw Evan as stiff. When I told him about the video, he just looked at me. He asked why I thought humiliating him in public was funny. I said it was harmless. He asked if I wanted our daughter to see it one day. I snapped that he was overreacting, that children need to see adults having fun. He did not argue. He just picked up his coffee and left for work. At the clinic, Colin leaned on the reception counter and asked how Evan had liked the prank. I told him Evan sulked. Of course, Colin laughed and said Evan was predictable, that he looked like the type who cried over broken routines. I laughed along, even though a small part of me felt uneasy. Colin told me I had spirit, that I was too alive to be weighed down by someone like Evan. I smiled at that and told myself it was true. Later that week, we had dinner at my parents' house. Cliff loved the story. He said Evan should be proud to be part of a viral moment, that a man needed to be roasted sometimes to stay sharp. Ruth frowned and said, "Maybe we went too far." I dismissed her. I said Evan needed to toughen up. Leah sat at the table pushing peas around her plate. She asked softly if Daddy was sad when we left him. I told her it was only a game. She said games should be fun for everyone. I rolled my eyes and told her she was too young to understand. That night back home, Evan sat at the kitchen table writing in a small notebook. I asked what he was doing. He said he was keeping track of things. I asked what things. He said nothing, only closed the notebook and put it in his bag. I laughed and told him he was pathetic, like a schoolboy with a diary. He did not reply. I felt a sting of frustration. Why would he not fight me? Why would he not shout? I wanted a scene, proof he cared. Instead, he just went to bed quietly. On Saturday, we went out with friends to a casual pub. Colin was there too. Everyone teased Evan about the roadside walk. Colin asked if he had finished the marathon yet. People laughed. I added that at least Evan did not get lost because he always walked in straight lines like his brain. They roared with laughter. Evan sat calmly, drinking water, saying nothing. That annoyed me. I whispered that he was making me look bad by not playing along. He said he was not a clown. I snapped that he was boring. Colin raised his glass to me and said I deserved better energy. I blushed and sipped my drink. Kendra filmed part of the night and posted again. By the time we got home, the clip already had comments. People said I had spark, that Evan looked like a shadow beside me. I told myself I was admired, that attention proved my worth. Evan put Leah to bed while I scrolled through the comments. When he came back, he asked if I thought turning him into a joke was helping us. I said yes, because laughter kept couples alive. He said it was not laughter, it was cruelty. I told him he was fragile. He said no more. He just looked at me for a long moment, then turned and left the room. Sunday afternoon, Marjorie called. She asked Evan to bring Leah over for dinner. I listened on speaker. She asked me if I thought humiliating my husband in front of family and strangers would make him respect me. I told her she should worry about her own life. She said calmly that respect cannot grow in soil of ridicule. I hung up. I told Evan his mother was poisoning him. He did not defend himself, only folded laundry in silence. I slammed the bedroom door and texted Colin about it. He wrote back that mothers-in-law always hated wives with power, and he sent a wink emoji. I smiled at the screen. That night I dreamed of Colin praising me in front of everyone and Evan standing silent in the corner. When I woke, Evan was already up packing Leah's school things. I asked why he was up so early. He said he had things to do. He placed the notebook into his work bag carefully. I wanted to grab it, but something in his calm made me hesitate. I told myself it was nothing, that he was just sulking in written form. Still, I could not shake the feeling that something was building, slow and deliberate like a storm. I could not stop. And yet, I convinced myself I was still in control. People laughed at Evan, not me. Colin admired me. My father backed me. My sister made me famous online. Evan's silence meant nothing, or so I thought. The clinic felt like my stage, and Colin made sure I knew it. He always leaned against the counter when the waiting room emptied, saying I had more spark than anyone there. He joked that Evan probably timed his steps when he walked, that he must even have a spreadsheet for how to fold socks. I laughed, telling him it was true, and each laugh felt like proof that I was right to live louder. He offered me rides when it rained, saying he would not let his star receptionist get wet. I accepted, even though I knew Evan would frown if he found out. When Evan asked later why Colin's car kept showing on the home camera, I told him he was paranoid. I said co-workers looked out for each other, that it was about safety. He said it looked like secrecy. I told him he was trying to control me. He said nothing more, only wrote something in his notebook. That notebook unnerved me. He always carried it now, neat pen lines filling each page. When I asked if he was journaling, he said he was keeping track of things. I laughed and said he should grow up. He smiled faintly but did not argue. That silence of his, cold, steady, made me feel small, so I pushed harder. At dinner one night, Leah refused to eat. She kept asking why Daddy had to walk home on the road. I said again it was just a game. She said games should make everyone happy. Evan stroked her hair and said she was right. I snapped that he was teaching her to judge me. He said he was only teaching her honesty. I said he was turning her against me. He picked up his plate and ate quietly at the sink. The bills started piling up on the counter. Evan stacked them neatly, highlighting due dates. He asked if I opened them. I said I was busy working, unlike him who just pushed papers. He said ignoring them hurt us both. I told him to stop acting like my father. He said nothing, just slipped another page into his notebook. Cliff came over that weekend. He laughed about the roadside video again, saying Evan should get a medal for endurance. He said a man who could not take a joke did not deserve a lively wife. I smiled, enjoying the way he defended me. Evan stayed quiet, only refilling Leah's juice and returning to his seat. Cliff called him humorless. I said Evan always killed the mood. Evan looked at me steady but did not respond. That silence burned me more than insults. At work the next week, Colin brushed my arm as he handed me files. He said I looked too good for the front desk. I blushed. A coworker glanced over and frowned. Later in the lounge, Colin sat close and asked if Evan had forgiven me for the roadside prank. I said no, that he was still sulking. Colin said, "Some men never grow spines." I laughed, though part of me wondered if Evan's silence was spine after all. That night, Evan asked if Colin ever crossed lines at work. I said no, he was a mentor. He asked why Colin messaged me after midnight. I said it was clinic business. He said business did not happen at 1 in the morning. I said he was paranoid again. He said he only wanted clarity. I told him he was suffocating me. He looked at me calmly and said, "Noted." Before writing in his book, I complained to Ruth about Evan's notebook. She said maybe he was just trying to process feelings. I said he was turning into a robot. She said maybe I should ask myself why he needed to write things down. I hung up on her. Kendra, on the other hand, loved the attention online. She posted another clip, a mashup of me laughing while Evan stood still in the background. People commented that I looked radiant and he looked lifeless. I sent the clip to Colin and he replied with fire emojis. Later, Leah cried at bedtime. She said she wanted me home earlier. I told her mommy worked hard for her. Evan tucked her in and whispered a story while I sat scrolling my phone. She clung to him, not me. That stung, but I told myself it was because he spoiled her. I texted Colin that night saying my family was ungrateful. He replied that powerful women always made others uncomfortable. That message made me feel chosen again. Sunday dinner at Marjorie's was tense. She looked at Evan's notebook and asked what it was. He said it was for clarity. She nodded and said clarity mattered in storms. She looked at me and asked if I thought humiliating my husband online was love. I told her respect was earned. She said dignity should not be optional. I told her to stop acting holy. She served pie and did not answer. Back home, I confronted Evan. I said his mother was filling his head with poison. He said she was offering perspective. I said he was betraying me by listening. He said he was protecting Leah by staying calm. I told him calmness was weakness. He said weakness was mocking someone you depend on. I froze at that. He closed his notebook gently and went to bed. In the kitchen, the unopened bill sat under the lamp. On top, he had left a sticky note in his handwriting. Documented. My stomach twisted. I crumpled it and threw it away, but I could not shake the image of his steady hand recording everything. I poured wine, scrolled Colin's texts, and convinced myself Evan was the problem. Still, I felt the ground shifting under me, slow but certain, like something inevitable was waiting. The pub was crowded, sticky floors and loud laughter, and I loved it because it made me feel important. Colin had saved a seat for me near the center, close enough that everyone could see us. He raised his glass when I arrived and said the star had entered. People clapped half joking, but I basked in it. Evan came later with Leah, who sat quietly with a juice box while we all talked. Colin leaned over and asked Evan if he dared to order something stronger than water. Evan said he was driving his daughter home. Colin laughed and said he always had an excuse. I laughed too, louder than I needed to. As the night went on, the jokes piled higher. Colin made a bet that Evan would not last 2 songs on the dance floor. Friends cheered. I pushed Evan's arm and told him to prove he was not boring. He shook his head and said no. Colin shouted that he was predictable and the group erupted. I joined in saying he killed every vibe. Leah looked up at me confused but stayed quiet. I ignored her. Evan stood there calm, unflinching. That calm infuriated me. I wanted him to snap, to yell, to show he cared. Instead, he sipped his water and paid for the table's food when the bill came. That made everyone go quiet for a moment, embarrassed. After he left with Leah, people asked why he never fought back. I told them he was passive, that I had to create sparks, or else our marriage would die. Colin smirked and said sparks came easily when 2 people matched. I blushed and looked away. Later, Kendra posted clips from the night. Colin laughing with me, Evan sitting silent, Leah drawing on a napkin. Comments poured in, some saying I looked radiant, others saying Evan looked like a ghost. I shared the clip anyway because I liked the likes. When we got home, Evan was waiting in the kitchen, Leah asleep in her room. On the table sat a printed copy of Kendra's pub clip. Across the bottom in Evan's handwriting was the word documented. I scoffed and asked if he was building a court case. He said nothing. He tucked the paper into his notebook and closed it. I shouted that he was pathetic, hiding behind paper. He only looked at me, calm, steady, and went upstairs. The next morning, Leah showed me a drawing she had made. It was of me smiling with friends and of Evan standing apart alone. A small figure in the corner. She said it was from the pub. She said Daddy always looked alone. I told her she was exaggerating. She said she saw it with her own eyes. My chest tightened, but I forced a smile and told her Daddy was just shy. She shrugged and went back to coloring. That afternoon, Ruth called. She asked if I realized how much humiliation could corrode a marriage. I told her she always defended Evan. She said she defended dignity. I hung up. Later, Cliff called and laughed about the pub, saying Evan was lucky to have a wife who got attention. He said any man would be proud. I agreed, though deep down I felt uneasy. At the clinic, Colin asked if Evan had sulked again. I said, yes, he always did. Colin shook his head and said, a man like that would drag me down forever. He said I should focus on myself. I told him maybe I would. He smiled knowingly. A coworker overheard and frowned, but I ignored her. That evening, I confronted Evan. I said he was making me look like a villain by staying so quiet. He said I was doing that myself. I shouted that he was twisting things. He said no, he was recording them. I told him notebooks did not prove anything. He said facts would. I stormed off, slamming the door. Later that night, I scrolled through the pub clips again. Comments had shifted. Some now asked if mocking a husband in front of his child was cruel. I deleted those, told myself they were jealous. Colin texted a laughing emoji and said the dance bet should have been double. I smiled and told myself at least he understood me. But when I went to bed, Evan's notebook lay on the nightstand. I picked it up and flipped through pages, dates, times, quotes, receipts taped in. My heart raced. I shoved it back down before he returned. When he came in, he looked at me strangely as if he knew. He slid the book back into his bag without a word. That silence again, heavier now, almost sharp. I told myself he was bluffing, but a small voice in my head whispered that he was building something I could not stop. I poured wine and scrolled Colin's messages again. He told me I deserved someone who laughed with me. I clung to that. But the image of Evan's careful handwriting, documented, would not leave my mind. The clinic holiday party was supposed to be my moment, and I dressed like it was. A red dress, bright earrings, hair done better than usual. Colin noticed the second I walked in. He said I lit up the room, that Evan should be proud. Evan came later with Leah only because I insisted, though he looked out of place among the music and lights. Colin grabbed me by the hand and pulled me into the center when the DJ started a song. Everyone clapped as we spun. I laughed louder than I felt, loving the attention, ignoring the way Evan stood at the side with Leah holding his hand. Colin draped his blazer over my shoulders when we stepped outside for air. He said it suited me. I blushed, pretending it was harmless. When Evan came to get me, I kept the blazer on. He asked quietly if we could leave. I said, no, not yet. He took Leah home himself, and I stayed behind with Colin and the others. Cameras flashed, phones recorded. By midnight, the photos already circled online. Me with Colin's jacket, laughing with my head thrown back while Evan was nowhere in sight. When I finally got home, Evan was at the kitchen table. He looked at the doorbell camera on his phone and asked why I came home with Colin's blazer. I said it was cold. He asked if I rode with him. I said yes, but only because it was safer. He said it did not look right. I said the camera lies. He said nothing more, only set down a copy of the still image the camera had caught. Me in the hallway, Colin leaning close as he adjusted the jacket on my shoulders. Across the bottom, he had written, documented. I snapped that he was paranoid that no one else cared, but people did care. By morning, the group chat was buzzing. Kendra had posted the still with the caption, Power Pair. Cliff commented that his daughter always attracted winners. Ruth left no comment. Marjorie texted Evan privately telling him to stay calm. Leah asked me over breakfast who the tall man was. I said he was just a driver. She frowned but said nothing. Later that week, HR emailed me. Confidential interview request. Manager, subordinate conduct policy. My stomach sank. I told myself it was routine, nothing serious. I told Evan it was standard paperwork. He said quietly, noted, and wrote in his notebook. I wanted to scream. That night I called Colin in a panic. He laughed and said HR never did anything to top sales staff. He told me to stay calm. He told me to remember he had my back. I wanted to believe him, but his voice carried a crack I had never heard before. At dinner with my parents, Ruth asked why I was in photos with Colin so often. I said he was my mentor. Cliff jumped in, saying I was smart to be seen with a man of power. He said Evan should learn from him. Evan stayed silent, eating slowly. Leah excused herself early, saying she felt tired. I followed her upstairs. She was drawing another picture. Me dancing with Colin while Daddy stood far away holding her hand. I told her she was imagining things. She said she saw it with her own eyes. My chest felt heavy, but I smiled and said she was too young to understand. The next day at the clinic, Colin brushed my hand as he passed me files. He whispered that we had to be more careful now. I asked what he meant. He said HR was watching. I laughed, but my laugh shook. That night, Evan tucked Leah in and then set another paper on the table. A rideshare receipt showing a stop at the boutique hotel before coming home from the party. He asked why. I said, drivers sometimes took the long way. He asked why I still had Colin's blazer when I walked in. I said again, the camera lies. He nodded slowly and wrote something in his notebook. Kendra sent me a link to another post she had made. Clips from the party with me laughing in Colin's jacket. The caption, Boss Energy. The likes made me feel proud for a moment until I read a few comments. Some called me radiant. Others asked if humiliating a husband in front of his child was love. I deleted those, but the words lingered. Evan said nothing that night. He placed Leah's backpack by the door, folded laundry, and went to bed. I stared at his notebook on the counter. Part of me wanted to grab it and tear it up, but something about the calmness with which he guarded it stopped me. It felt heavier than paper, like a weapon I could not touch. I poured wine and scrolled Colin's texts again. He sent a heart emoji, then another message. HR can't touch me. I wanted to believe him, but the reflection in the glass door caught my eye. Me holding his blazer caught forever in that camera. Still, my stomach knotted. I told myself it was nothing, that Evan was bluffing. Still, when I went to bed, his notebook sat on the nightstand, silent, but louder than any words. And I knew deep down the storm was closer than I wanted to admit. The storm finally broke on a quiet morning, not with shouting, but with a knock at the door. A courier stood there holding a heavy envelope with my name on it. I tore it open at the kitchen counter, half expecting another bill. Instead, stamped pages slid out across the table. Temporary separation petition, financial restraints, a proposed parenting plan. My hand shook as I read the lines. Evan was listed as primary custodian during school weeks. Ver was named as alternate caregiver. I gasped and said he was trying to steal Leah from me. Evan sat calmly at the table with his coffee. He said all communication would now go through the co-parent app. He said he would pick Leah up at 6. Then he folded the newspaper and left for work. I screamed that he was overreacting, that he was weak for hiding behind lawyers, but he did not look back. I ran to my phone and called Colin. He told me to relax, that HR never touched top sales staff. He said Evan was just bluffing, but the envelope in my hands was real, and the case number stamped at the top was colder than his reassurance. I called Kendra next, sending her screenshots. She replied with a single line. They listed my videos as evidence. My stomach dropped. I had not even thought about her posts, but of course, Evan had collected them all. Later that day, Vera came by to collect Leah for the night. She carried a folder of her own, neat pages of routines, bedtime notes, and meal logs. She said it was for Leah's stability. I rolled my eyes and accused her of interfering. She said calmly she was protecting her granddaughter. Leah hugged her and went without fuss. The sight of them walking out together left me hollow. That week, HR summoned me again. Rhea sat across from me with a file of screenshots. She asked if I consented to a device audit. I forced a smile and said yes, nothing to hide. Inside, I panicked. She showed me timestamps of messages with Colin. 1:17 a.m. 2:04 a.m. I said we were dedicated employees. She said policy required boundaries. I laughed nervously, saying passion was part of success. She did not laugh. At home, Evan set another page on the counter. A sitter's note stating Leah had been returned at 11 p.m. on a school night. He said nothing, only wrote documented across the top and slid it into his notebook. I shouted that he was weaponizing our daughter. He said quietly he was protecting her. I wanted to rip the notebook apart, but I could not move. When I told my parents, Cliff called Evan vindictive, said, "No real man dragged quartz into family life." Ruth stayed quiet, looking down at her hands. I clung to Cliff's words, repeating them to myself like armor, but when I tried to reach Kendra again, she did not answer. That night, I sat alone in the condo with the papers spread out before me. Legal language, orders, schedules, all binding, all real. I poured a glass of wine and stared at Colin's last text. HR can't touch me. It felt flimsy now, like a joke without a laugh. The reflection in the window showed me clutching his blazer again, the same blazer from the camera. Still, my chest ached. For the first time, I wondered if this was a game I could not win. The next morning, Evan came to the door, punctual as always. He said he was there for Leah. I said she was not ready. He pointed to the app notification that had already set the exchange time. I said he was cruel. He said it was order. Leah came running, backpack in hand, hugging him tightly. They walked away together, leaving me in the doorway with the papers spread across the counter and silence filling the condo. I told myself he was bluffing, but the stamped seal at the top of the page told me he was not. The courthouse felt colder than I imagined. Beige walls and buzzing lights, every step echoing. I sat with my lawyer, clutching a thin folder of excuses, while Evan stood on the other side with his attorney and a thicker binder that looked too heavy for comfort. He did not look at me, only at the judge when called in. The mediator asked us to explain our goals. I said Evan was punishing me, that the roadside prank and party photos were harmless, just laughter. I said he wanted to control me by taking Leah away. Evan spoke quietly, saying Leah needed stability, school nights without late pickups, meals, and bedtimes on time. He handed over Vare's caregiver logs, each page filled with notes, dates, times, routines. He handed over sitter statements about 11 p.m. returns. He showed the doorbell camera, still the pub clips, the viral roadside video, even Colin's late-night messages. My stomach dropped each time a page flipped. I tried to argue. I said the camera lied, that people twisted jokes. I said Colin was just a mentor, nothing more. I said Evan was using his mother to turn Leah against me. The mediator stayed calm and said the evidence showed patterns, not accidents. My lawyer shifted uncomfortably, whispering that the documents spoke louder than words. I felt cornered. The judge granted temporary custody to Evan during school weeks. With exchanges at Vera's house, financial restraints were approved, meaning I could not touch the joint accounts beyond basic expenses. The co-parent app was declared the only communication channel. I gasped, saying Evan had stripped me of power. Evan stayed calm, saying it was for Leah. The judge ordered both of us to take a co-parenting class, and I was assigned a boundaries course as well. At the clinic, HR finished its investigation. Rhea called me in and said I would be reassigned under a new manager, barred from after-hours events. Colin was demoted and given a final warning. Both of us had to attend ethics training. I wanted to argue, but her tone was final. Colin texted later that it was temporary, that he would bounce back. I did not reply. Back at the condo, Evan returned Colin's blazer in a sealed bag with an inventory receipt from HR. He left it on the chair without a word. Holding it felt like holding evidence of my own downfall. Leah came by with her backpack for an exchange. She hugged me, then asked if Daddy was picking her up. I said yes. She nodded and clung to his hand when he arrived. The co-parenting app chimed with the finalized schedule. School nights with Evan, alternating weekends with me, holidays split. I stood in the doorway as dusk fell, my overnight bag by my side. The reflection from the door camera glared back at me. Me holding Colin's blazer, frozen in that moment that started it all. Evan walked away with Leah, their footsteps steady. leaving me with the silence of the condo and the glow of the app screen confirming what I had lost. Then it ended. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next story. Write in the comments from which city you are watching. A-ching, 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 a-ching.